to another episode of the Addiction Help Podcast, now in our second season as the flagship podcast on the Addiction Help Media Network. I am your host, Dan Hauser, as always, and on this episode, we are going to take a look at sobriety and family, specifically having children in sobriety. Now, for some people, that means having children after they have gotten sober. For some people, that means getting sober while already having a child and family around you and whatnot. And so specifically on this episode, I have brought Leah Numbers on with me today because she is someone who went through her sobriety journey with her child, with her son already born and in her life. And so I wanted to bring her on today to kind of talk about that journey, what she went through as far as all that went, having the, I don't want to say burden, but having the responsibilities of raising a child while also trying to better yourself and get sober. And for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, you may remember Leah joined Jess and I in one of our very early episodes to kind of share her story. For those of you who are new to the show, please go back and listen to that one because it truly is an amazing and inspiring story. So Leah, long drawn about way of saying thank you for coming back on with me today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So for those people that are new to the show, maybe if you just wanted to kind of give them, say, the Reader's Digest version of kind of your story when it comes to addiction, mental health, and sobriety, and kind of where you are now today before we get going.
Absolutely. So I have gotten sober 3 times. Third time's the charm for sure. And I just celebrated my 3 years of sobriety back in November, just a few days before my birthday. So that's quite a bit of a milestone because honestly, every month that I passed 2 years, I was like, okay, because that was the longest I made it in my past times when I quit drugs and alcohol. So that's where I'm at now. I'm 36 years old. I'm now living on my own, which is also a big change from last time when we spoke here. So that's been exciting and truly a testament to maintaining sobriety. I would literally not be able to be in a place of my own, on my own, supporting me and my son if it weren't for the fact that I was, not on alcohol and drugs. So, as far as my mental health journey, that's always ongoing. I've actually managed to stay out of therapy for a little bit, but definitely self-induced therapy on a daily basis. I think my therapist, I know she doesn't actually get tired of me, but it got to the point where she's like, are you sure you need to see me? Are you good? You can always come in, but I don't know if it's necessary. So I'm just in a really good place right now. And I definitely think that our talk before when I was here, that kind of catapulted me into a different direction on this journey of sobriety and maintaining, relatively decent mental health. So I appreciate another opportunity to be here to speak about this.
So for those who may not remember, or like I said, once again, new to the show, full disclosure, Leah is my sister-in-law. And ironically enough, it's actually that reason why I'm having her back on today, because as you can see, I'm back in my home studio today for the last week. I was actually up in Michigan with that side of the family. And so it was a conversation, kind of just, I don't want to say a throwaway conversation, but just kind of randomly the other day when we were all together, you had mentioned something about a conversation you had with your son and how you guys pretty much just talk about everything. And I don't know what it was. It took a couple days, but something just kind of clicked in my head. I'm like, you know what? I think it would be really cool to have you on to share your openness with your son, especially when it comes to addiction and sobriety, as well as ways that you personally have handled it, because obviously you're not the only one out there that has a child that is also now sober. I'm sure you're also not the only one who got sober after having your child. So I'm sure there's probably parents out there that would love to know. And of course, everything works differently for everybody, but maybe they would love to know kind of some of the things that you personally have done that has worked well for you and has benefited your relationship with your son as you have continued this sobriety journey. So like I mentioned, first question. So, like I said, you had your son before you got sober. You are now a single parent. When I say single parent, I don't mean in the literal sense you and your ex-husband obviously do still co-parent. But I say single parent because when your son's with you, obviously it's just you and him in the house, so you are by yourself, and so you are doing everything that involves parenting by yourself. And so, um, what was that experience for you like early on as you first kind of started to go on this sobriety journey that you're currently on, while also being a single parent in the standpoint of when you had your son, you were having to do everything kind of on your own?
So I have to say, first and foremost, I had I had people around me at the time when I wasn't sober. I had people around me that were gunning for my child in some ways more than I was. And trying to get me to open my eyes to see, like, hey, you have a really huge responsibility here. Um, and it took me a minute. And people tried really hard. I also, I think the reason it kind of took so long to get me to that place was because he was so young. So he's 7 now. And I mean, that's still really young, but I think I got very comfortable in assuming that what I was making him a part of, me using drugs and alcohol, and that he was going to be too young to realize it or too young to remember it. And that was me kind of just trying to continuously avoid acknowledgement and taking responsibility of myself and my responsibility to him. So when I got to the point where I made that decision to quit drugs and alcohol, I have to say it wasn't because of him. Like, I mean, I had him sitting right in front of me day in and day out, and that wasn't enough to push me. So I realized, like, no offense to him, but I have to make this decision for myself, and I have to be committed to it for my own wellness so that I can be a better mom to him and I can give him the life he deserves and the attention he deserves and the guidance and everything else that comes with parenting. And considering the fact that being a parent is, as cliche as it sounds, there's no handbook, there's no manual, there's no rules, like, it truly is make it up as you go along in some senses. Like, that's even more of a reason to really commit to the decision that I made to quit drugs and alcohol. Because it's like, well, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be a good parent with those things in my life. So my only opportunity to try to get this right is to remove that stuff from my life and to remove that noise. As he's gotten older, and especially recently with our move, like, that's been such a huge change in my own life, but also in his life. And I've had to get on his level to understand, like, at 7 years old, how is this huge change going to impact him? And I have to tie my sobriety into it because, like I mentioned at the beginning, like, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. I wouldn't be able to pay for his schooling. I wouldn't be able to put clothes on his back or food in his belly. So that has brought us and our relationship to a new level of honesty that truly blows me away most days, because I look at him and I'm like, oh crap, you're 7 and you get it. Like, that now being, over 3 years sober, that's what keeps me on this path. So now I can say, like, yes, he is a form of motivation for me to keep with this. And he is an inspiration to me and he is my North Star. But at the end of every single day, like, I have to face myself and say, I made it through today with the decision to not do drugs and drink. And then tomorrow I'm going to make that same decision. But I'd say, honestly, the honesty, that's been the most eye-opening part, coming from him, because he gets it. And those times when I was using and I didn't think he knew what was going on, he knew. And I'm like, oh, okay, 4-year-olds can remember things, so the biggest part with that is the fact that when he asks those tough questions, or he reminds me, because just when it was a few days after we moved into our new place, and he was with his dad for that weekend that I was moving, and then he came home. So we went to the at-home store that was nearby, and we're walking in there, and he's been asking a lot about money and like the cost of living and things like that. And it's great, of course, to teach a 7-year-old so he can learn to be financially responsible, but he takes it to a new level because he outright said to me, Mom, I remember when you used to spend all your money on booze and then you'd get drunk and you'd make bad decisions. And I'm really glad that you don't do that anymore. And I was like, whoa, okay. I just got called out by a 7-year-old, but it's so completely necessary. And I think as a parent, in being in this position of having to make a conscious decision every day to maintain sobriety, those moments I'm so grateful for when he speaks so honestly and openly, because I'd be lying if I said that 3 years later it's easy and like, oh, it's just super easy to be sober. No, it's not. I mean, most days it's a walk in the park, but there's some times that it's really difficult. And being that he feels comfortable being so honest with me, that keeps me humble and it makes me recognize my place. And that I only have control of myself really at the end of the day, and I have to use that wisely so that I can, 3 years from now, the things that he's saying to me aren't about when I wasn't sober. They're just going to be like about wonderful memories that we had or whatever it may be. So that was kind of a roundabout answer, but we made it.
No, it's good. And I want to go back to something really quickly too that you said early on there. You mentioned your mentality when you first made this decision, and the fact that it wasn't solely based on him, and he was younger at the time, and so a lot of that stuff factored in. Do you think had he been older? Let's say he was his age now 3 years ago. So let's say you had started to make this decision when he was, say, 7 or 8, or there are some parents that even do this when their children are in their teens. Do you think your mind frame or mentality would have been different had he been a little bit older and already been more conscious of what was going on, needing more things in terms of schooling and whatnot as kids get older, or did his age have nothing to do with it?
So I think age has a ton to do with it. I look at it from a few different perspectives. I look at it from a developmental perspective because of what I've learned through my education. That has helped me to actually not be so tough on myself. And that sounds kind of weird, but it's kind of like what I said before. Like at 4 years old, it wasn't registering with me like, hey, you probably shouldn't be doing this. You have a child to take care of. But if he had been 7 back then, I think he probably would have been doing the same things, AKA calling me out, probably not in the most respectful way like he does now. And I know myself well enough, and a lot of people who know me can also attest to this. When you tell me to do something directly or you call me out, especially if you're rude about it, I put up even bigger barriers. And it's something that I've learned to use now in a way that's more beneficial to my own life. And it's not like such a defiant thing, but I think it would have caused, I don't know that I would have made the decision in the timely fashion that I did, which some people would say, well, Leo, you got sober 3 times and it took you this long. But like, if people knew the ins and outs of every part of my life, they'd be like, wow, the fact that you even made that decision is kind of a miracle. But yeah, so I think in a backwards way, me using the excuse of my child's young age ended up pushing me farther along in this journey than had he been older and more conscious of what was going on around him. I also think in some ways, like things would have gone much worse for me because I was doing things that easily would have gotten my child taken away from me. And I was good enough at covering it up, at lying about it. I also had people around me that saw, but they weren't in a position to, report me to anybody who would have done something. So I got very lucky in that regard. But all those things, it's like really every day, those things are always taking up space in my head just because it's got to be, I think we need those things to be reminders to us of like, hey, you may be on the other side of this now, but you're never too good to go back. It's like there's nothing stopping me, especially now living on my own. And this isn't like a warning because I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to do drugs, but realistically speaking, like you have to recognize that I could leave my apartment and go to the liquor store. I could text somebody that has a connection to somebody who could get me drugs. I can do those things. I won't do them. I can't do them for my own, wellness and for the sake of my child. So
So for all the parents out there, I don't think it's any secret whether you're together or separated. The key to kind of co-parenting and doing it well is for both sides to be on the same page. And like I said, whether you were living in the same house, separated, whatnot, it's important to be on the same page with when it comes to your child or children. So, what has that experience been like for you? Not just in these 3 years since you've been sober, but previously as you worked on trying to get sober and the relapses and whatnot. How has that dynamic played out as far as the co-parenting side of things go, and making sure that kind of everyone's, I guess you could say, on the same page with the messaging and with just everything in general?
So I have to say, and maybe someday I'll be able to have a conversation with my son's dad. I would love to pick his brain to know like how he felt when I was in the thick of stuff. Cause I can't even imagine, he thankfully has not experienced addiction. I think it's safe to say not even in his family, just from what I observed in the time that we were together. So he, for the majority of that time that I was using, like he kept a healthy distance from me. Like he never called me out, or anything like that. But now where we're at, and when I told him that I quit drinking and doing drugs, like there was a level of support that I felt from him, and also like a giant sigh of relief, which, yeah, I mean, he definitely deserved to take that weight off his shoulders. I can't even imagine what he must have felt. And then on top of that, having a healthy relationship with his girlfriend. So like we all just have this really wonderful co-parenting relationship, and a full transparency about, my past addiction issues and in maintaining sobriety today and moving forward. So he and I don't communicate too much as far as that goes, but his girlfriend and I have been very communicative about it. And that the two of them are an incredible support system in the way that they present themselves to be, which I'm very grateful for. And that's been like an interesting, and I say interesting in a positive way, it's been an interesting relationship to navigate and to learn what works for us, so that I'm being attentive to making sure that co-parenting relationship is positive, while also, maintaining my sobriety and a good mental space.
You mentioned too, obviously, and we talked about it earlier, you and your son, obviously, you guys are open books with each other. You can tell him anything you need to tell him. He can tell you anything that you need to tell him. Sometimes he can say it in a way that may not be the most tactful, but hey, at least he's having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been like that always, or what was it like in the beginning when you first were having those types of conversations with him? Did you just kind of sit him down and say, hey, this is where I was, this is what I'm doing now? How did you react to it initially? How has it progressed to where you guys are now?
I think we had the advantage of living with my parents, which in that sense was almost a buffer for him to not see everything as it was. And then also for me to ease into those difficult conversations, because now it's super easy for me to have those conversations with him. But in the beginning, I felt so much shame and embarrassment and guilt, because it was like, for one, I missed out on so much time that I actually was present with him because I was under the influence. And even now, I have moments where I just like lock into him, and then I remember, specific times of like, oh, we had this time together, but I wasn't completely there, so honestly, all those negative emotions, they kind of inhibited me from getting to a place quicker than I did to where he and I could have those conversations. But at the same time, yeah, I think it was a slow progression. And then now that we are, I think your environment, dictates to a certain degree how your relationships are within that environment. So my relationship with him was one way when we were living with my parents. And now that we're on our own, it's just taken us to a whole different place because, and I don't mean this, in a negative way towards my parents, but like there's no outside noise. And that would be whether I was living with them or living with the roommate or, anybody. So now that we just have our space, we're able to have those conversations openly and honestly. Because I also think too, when you have other people around, it's just, it's human nature to maybe want to buffer some things. And in a parent child relationship, I mean, people on the outside, people are going to say what they think is best and give advice or give guidance. And I do think that my relationship with my son is quite a bit different than most people have with their kids, whether they're sober or not. Like, I'm just so huge on honesty because I recognize I cannot change anything that I've done in my past. And, I've already had to answer to some of it with him. And I may spend the rest of my life, and honestly, I kind of hope that I will, in a way, answering to him. Because the one thing I could hope for him is that he doesn't end up in the same position as I've put myself in, and I say put myself in because I'm an adult now. Do I think that there were influential contributing factors that got me to the place I got to with addiction? For sure. But at some point you can't sit and like blame everything around you. So I'm grateful to have been able to take responsibility for that and continue to do that moving forward.
Well, that was gonna be my next question too. He's 7, so he's a little young now, and maybe it's a conversation you have in a few years from now. But is there a time and place where you think you may have a conversation with him? I don't want to necessarily say warning him about using drugs and alcohol, but obviously as he gets older, he's going to get exposed with it just because that's how life is. Obviously, we all can make our own decisions, and I'm sure he will be in a position for him to ultimately make that decision for himself. But will you have a conversation with him as he gets older, just not necessarily letting him know, but maybe reminding him about some of your past issues and that he may be at a greater risk of also having that happen to him or anything involving that type of talk, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we actually already have had a few conversations and they've come up kind of in abrupt ways where I can't think of like a specific example but the way it one time played out was like he and I were butting heads on a behavioral type of thing with him. And it got to the point where it kind of escalated, like emotions were high. And I ended up saying to him, like, do you know how I know this? Do you know how I know what I'm trying to teach you about? And he says, because you went through it. And I'm like, that right there, like, because I went through it. And I explained to him, I think the greatest thing we can do as parents in general is like level with our children. Let them know that you're also a human being, because it's really devastating if you become, as you're growing up from childhood to adulthood, and then you're like, oh crap, my parent or my parents aren't who they led me to believe they were. I can't control Gunner's perception of me, but I really aim to not devastate him with who I am. So to be able to share, even just in age appropriate ways, because I'm big on that. And it's like, I would gladly just pour it all out to him now, but he wouldn't get most of it. So when I do see opportunities arise where I can connect something from my life and the decisions that I've made, especially the really bad ones, to where he's at now, and then help him to see, in a forward direction, like these are decisions you may be faced with, or these are circumstances you may, find yourself in. But I think another part of it too is like, I'm not going to raise him to be scared of drugs and alcohol. They're everywhere. And it's weird now that I'm kind of on the outside of it. I'm like, to think that there's a liquor store, like there's a place that you can go and buy this substance that most likely will do more harm to your life than good, whether it's on a mental level or a physical health level, like whatever it is, like it's just not that great for you. But I'm not going to raise him to say, well, because I don't do it, you're not allowed to, or you should be scared to. Because at the end of the day, like really, I just simply make the choice every day to not put those things in my body. Of course, it's so much bigger than that, but I just want him to be able to make that choice, what, for himself one day. By all means, I really hope that he doesn't. I hope that he just is like, you know what? I saw what my mom went through. I know how it can work. I'm not scared of it, but I hope he doesn't ever find a reason to latch on to that. So fingers crossed, but you never know.
I mean, everyone, sometimes people have to learn for themselves
For
to
sure.
ultimately realize, oh, well, yeah, you know what? Actually, I don't like this, but no, I think I think it's good that you're not scaring him into it, because obviously, once again, we're all humans. We all need to kind of learn for ourselves sometimes, saying, okay, yeah, no, this isn't for me, and now I know it, and I can move on and never kind of wonder what if or anything like that. So when it comes to recovery and sobriety, we often talk a lot about support groups, support systems. It's obviously incredibly important to have that support system with you. Um, through your journey so far, have you felt that your son has been part of that support system that you have surrounded yourself with? Do you feel like he's an integral part of that support system?
So I do, but I want to be really clear as to how I feel his support, because I think it's very easy to latch on. I mean, it's easy to latch on to our loved ones in general, for support, especially when it comes to something like maintaining sobriety from drugs and alcohol. But having, I've recognized that like having an attachment to anything outside of myself actually will deter my focus from what I'm trying to maintain. So I've had to learn to be very cautious, especially in the times when I'm feeling I don't want to say tempted to drink, because I really don't get those feelings anymore. But when I do think about drinking, or, think about something from my past, I have to make sure that I have like a strong enough foundation within myself to where I'm not turning to my son, especially because like he's not ever going to be equipped to support me at the level that I need as an adult in order to maintain this sobriety. Because he's my child, and it is just my view that like that's not a boundary that you should cross with your own child. My kid will never be my therapist. He will never be the person that I go to for like looking for support. I look to him, but in those times when I actually feel the most supported by him, he's not doing anything except for existing.
No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. So it's no secret, not that I have to tell you, being a parent is hard. It can be incredibly mentally taxing, even on the best of days, even on the good days.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, especially when they're at a younger age, like you have with your son now. For many people that aren't in recovery or don't experience mental health and addiction issues, they may sit down at the end of the night with a glass of wine or a drink of some sort and just say, okay, I can breathe now. I'm going to have this. I can unwind mentally from the day. I can just, the day's finally done now. They're sleeping. Okay, and I can breathe and use this to relax. Obviously, not just for you, but for everyone who is in recovery, that is not an option for them.
Right.
So what kind of things do you do to kind of keep yourself from spinning out of control, especially on those really bad days where it's just been a grind all day and just nothing has gone right? And in your old days, it might have been the day where you reach for the liquor bottle and you can't anymore. What things do you do now to kind of keep yourself, grounded and level?
So I have I gotta put my money where my mouth is on this one, because I've still been getting into the groove of things with living on my own. But I'm big on meditation, big on breathing exercises. That's another thing as far as like the support between me and my son goes, is I have taught him some of those techniques. So like doing breathing exercises, doing, meditation. Sometimes he'll even come to me and be like, "Mom, do you need to breathe?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." Or do you want to meditate with me? So those are the things that I do on my own and with him. I'm big on writing. I write a lot. I've recently started getting back into music. So honestly, anything to occupy my time. And probably the biggest thing that I've had to do is stop arguing with myself. That sounds a bit nutty, but full disclosure, like I have ongoing conversations with myself every day throughout the day from the moment I wake up to when I go to bed. And that for me has been helpful to just be like, you know what? Don't argue with yourself, Leah, when you're in these moments where you're feeling high stress or anxiety and you know, like I know what is good for me. I know what's not good for me. And it really is easy. I'm just very stubborn. But I can say, like, I've been arguing with myself a lot less. So when I have those moments, it's like, yep, I turn on my meditation app, or I do some reading even. So just anything that has to do with self-care, I'm real big on, because those are things that no matter where you're at, no matter who you're around, you can use. So it's even gotten to the point where I can be in a group of people and just take a moment and really just be inside myself and get to where I need to be to continue, either being with that group of people, or even sometimes it's if I recognize during those meditations or breathing exercises, like, okay, I don't feel comfortable or this isn't working. I don't get down on myself. I think that's the biggest thing, because inherently I carry, I'm able to carry guilt. I'm still able to carry shame. So I have to be very careful as to not get down on myself in moments where it's like, okay, the meditation isn't working, or the breathing exercise aren't working, or reading, like it feels like nothing's working. Well, find something else, really, is what it comes down to. So I've learned to use my stubbornness and in a positive way to, keep going in that regard.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us today and sharing your story with us. Hopefully, some people out there listened to this and maybe kind of felt a little bit better about their own parenting, or got some fun, or not, I shouldn't say fun, got some new ideas or tips or tricks to things that they can now go ahead and do in their own lives. So, Leah, thank you so much for coming on with us again, and continuing to kind of share your story of sobriety with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it so much. And always grateful to share these types of things, because I do have these especially when it comes to parenting, I do have these conversations with my son, and even just with my close family members. I'm sure that you've heard Jacqueline probably share things with you too. So thanks for giving me this opportunity to put it out there.
That'll do it for today's show. Thank you once again to Leah for joining me. And of course, thank you all for joining me on this episode today. Please continue to like, subscribe, rate, review. Please continue to share with your friends, family members, and loved ones. As always, like I do at the end of every episode, I take this time to remind everyone that if you or a loved one is struggling, please go get the help that you need. It's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to seek out the professional help that you need so you can feel better and enjoy life to the fullest. And so addictionhelp.com is a great place to get those resources to get that process started, whether you're looking for more information about specific ailments or you're looking for more information about how to get the process started to seek the treatment and the help that you need. You can find all of that at addictionhelp.com. So that will do it for today's show. We hope everyone out there had a great holiday season. And if you're listening to us this episode in the new year, we hope that you had a healthy and happy new year as well. And we will talk to you again next time. Have a good one, everybody.